Hello and welcome. My name is Vineet Malhotra and you're watching NewsX World. Let's begin with the headlines. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky has signed a decree to begin the process of withdrawing from the anti-landmine Ottawa Convention. The move still requires parliamentary approval and formal notification to the United Nations. An IDF soldier was killed today during fighting in northern Gaza, and the military says that Sergeant Yisrael Natan Rosenfeld, 20, from Ra'ana, died after an explosive device detonated during operations in Kafr Jabalia. Iran has asked the United Nations to hold Israel and the United States responsible for the recent 12-day war. In a letter to the UN chief, Tehran demanded recognition of their role in the conflict and called for compensation. Germany plans to set up a joint cyber research center with Israel to counter growing digital threats. The move aims to boost intelligence cooperation amidst rising concerns over Russia and China. A Ukrainian F-16 pilot dies defending against a huge Russian onslaught with hundreds of drones and missiles, officially confirmed. President Zelensky urges more Western help as the strikes damage homes, infrastructure and injure at least 7. India has strongly rejected Pakistan's claim that it was behind a deadly car bomb attack in North Waziristan that killed 13 soldiers. A Pakistan Taliban faction has claimed responsibility for the bombing. Well, the British government has issued a statement after deaths to IDF chants were broadcast at Glastonbury Music Festival at the music artist Bob Willen's performance. The British government says it will launch an investigation into the event, with the festival also condemning the actions. Uganda's President Yoweri Museveni has confirmed he will run in the 2026 presidential elections. The 80-year-old leader is aiming to extend his nearly 40-year rule. Well, Iran has formally called on the United Nations to hold Israel and the United States responsible for the recent 12-day conflict in the region. In a letter published on Sunday, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi urged the UN Security Council to recognize both Israel and the US as the initiators of the aggression. The letter accuses them of being directly responsible for the outbreak of hostilities and demands that they accept full responsibility, including the payment of compensation and reparations for the damages that have been caused. This move signals Tehran's intensified diplomatic efforts to shift international scrutiny onto Israel and Washington regarding the conflict. The letter was addressed to UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who now faces mounting pressure amid calls for an impartial investigation into the origins and consequences of the 12-day war. Moving on, Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky has signed a decree putting his war-torn country on track to leave the anti-landmine Ottawa Convention, according to a document published on his website. This move comes after the Baltic states and Poland announced their intention earlier in March to withdraw from the Ottawa Convention. To enter into force, the decision still must be ratified by the Ukrainian parliament and notified to the United Nations. Ukraine's foreign ministry has said in a statement that Ukraine is prioritizing the security of its citizens and the defense of the state. The treaty bans signatories from acquiring, producing, stockpiling or using anti-personnel mines, which are designed to be buried or hidden on the ground. They often leave victims mutilated if they are not immediately killed, and aid groups denounce the long-term risk of unexploded mines for civilians. More than 160 countries and territories are signatories to the Ottawa Convention, though neither the United States nor Russia have joined in. Mr. Keith Voss, former UK Minister, is joining us from London at this point in time. Keith, appreciate you being here. Well, the Ottawa Convention and the Ukrainians wanting out, what does that signify? This is obviously, a system which is old. It is also, in a way, defunct at this point in time. But this is obviously, a big deal coming in, where Mr. Zelensky is trying to, in fact, put out his wishes as to how the Ottawa Convention is not helping Ukraine at all. They're trying to, in fact, ration whatever they can get.
Good afternoon, Vinette from London. This is deeply disturbing and worrying because at this particular time you would have expected the sides to continue to open a dialogue that had been started initially by President Trump, saying he was going to, as we all know, sort this problem out within a week of becoming president. This has not happened. But this convention is really important. The person who campaigned most for this was the late Princess Diana. I'm sure your archives will show you pictures of Diana, then Princess of Wales, walking through landmine fields with her mask on, trying to highlight what it did to innocent people, not just those who are paid up members of the armed forces, innocent people who might, years after a war is finished, be walking through a field and then being blown up and mutilated, either dying or for the rest of their lives suffering. That's why so many countries in the world signed the Ottawa Convention. So many of them did so, apart from, as you correctly say, Russia and the Soviet and the United States. Those two countries haven't signed it, and now in March of this year, as you've just said, Poland, Lithuania, Finland have all decided to come out of the convention. This is very disturbing and very worrying indeed. And I hope there's an opportunity to convince them that this is the wrong thing to do.
Keith, what does this indicate about the security sentiment in Europe at this point in time? Earlier on, Germany also went on to say that right now their predominant priority in terms of foreign policy is helping Ukraine. They feel that it is the only thing that matters, because the landscape of security in Europe is continuously deteriorating because of this war with Russia.
Well, Zelensky did turn up to the NATO meeting earlier this week. He was in the family photograph along with the President of the United States and all the NATO leaders. But Ukraine is not a member of NATO. So the best way to upset Vladimir Putin and the Russians is to include Zelensky in a photograph of that kind, knowing full well that's one of the key red lines of the Russians. They want to make sure that Ukraine does not become a part of NATO. And to some extent, Vinit, it's irrelevant whether they are or not, because you've just said this, that other European countries, the Germans, the United Kingdom, the French, are all helping Ukraine. So whether it's in NATO or not makes no difference at all. They are still helping them. They're still giving billions of pounds and euros of taxpayers' money in order to help the Ukrainians. I understand why they're doing this, because this is their ally and this is what they have to do. But is the answer really to provoke the Russians when Donald Trump has made it clear that he wants to make sure that there is peace? After all, hasn't he shown us that it's possible to start and finish a war within 24 hours? Sending off the bombers to bomb Iran, sending them back, and then everything stops. And getting very angry with one of the parties when they continued. So Donald Trump has this special relationship, as we know, with Vladimir Putin. Why are they not meeting to try to solve this problem? Why are innocent people, for years and years to come, this is not something that you just plant underneath a road or in a forest or in a town. This is going to stay there for years and years. And some innocent child, and we're all parents here, just walking along the road, just walking onto a landmine, being blown to bits because of what was left years ago. This is madness. And I hope that we can convince Ukraine to stay in. But the best way to do that is to try and get this peace process moving. Try and get the people around the table. Try and get that summit between the President of the United States, the President of Russia, and the President of Ukraine, because you can't leave them out. Ukraine has to be at the table when the decisions are made. Get that done. If Donald Trump really wants the Nobel Peace Prize, this is the way that he's going to get it. Not for anything he's done between India and Pakistan or in Israel and Iran. This is the defining moment for his presidency. And let's hope he picks it up, because the decision taken by the president of Ukraine is very, very worrying indeed, deeply concerning.
You're absolutely right, Keith, and always a pleasure. Thank you so much for speaking with us. All right, moving on. Tensions have escalated between India and Pakistan following a deadly suicide bombing in North Waziristan that killed 13 Pakistani soldiers. Pakistan's military has accused Indian-backed militants of carrying out the attack, calling it an act of desperation by what it described as Indian-sponsored Kharijis. In response, India's Ministry of External Affairs strongly rejected the claims, calling them baseless and deserving of contempt. The attack carried out on Saturday involved a vehicle packed with explosives ramming into a military convoy. The Hafiz Gul Bahadur group, a known faction of the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, later claimed responsibility. Is the latest in a string of high casualty attacks by TTP and its affiliates, who have intensified operations along Pakistan's volatile border with Afghanistan. And since the start of the year, nearly 300 people, mostly security forces, have died in insurgent attacks. Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, former diplomat, is joining us at this point in time. Ambassador Dayal, always a pleasure having you, sir. Well, this is, of course, absurd when Pakistan names India in any allegation when it concerns the TTP, an organization which has sworn to take out Pakistani soldiers. And let us also not forget that Pakistan at this point in time, or rather, sir, the state of Punjab, we call it in Pakistan, is surrounded by dissenting cultural militants, who want out of the Pakistani regime. But I think Pakistan, instead of addressing that dissent, is looking at some way to pass on the responsibility that it should own up to India.
Well, Vineet, first of all, thanks for having me on your show. As you have pointed out, the province of Punjab in Pakistan is surrounded by other ethnic provinces which feel disillusioned because their rights are taken away from them and their people are deprived. There is an ongoing insurgency in Balochistan, as also in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, and there is a lot of unhappiness also in the province of Sindh in Pakistan. In fact, in the early 80s, when I used to be posted in Pakistan, there was a secessionist movement called GA Sindh, and the Sindhi leaders wanted to form a separate province called Sindhu Desh, modeled on Bangladesh, which had been formed a decade earlier. In fact, they wanted India to support them, but for a number of reasons, I think India didn't extend sort of support. But there is no doubt that there is a lot of unhappiness in the provinces of Pakistan other than Punjab, because Punjab rules the roost and exploits the other provinces. Now, as you pointed out, there was a suicide bombing in North Waziristan, which is part of Pakistan's Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province yesterday, and 13 soldiers were killed and a lot of other people were injured. Now, the attack was claimed by the Hafiz Gul Bahadur group, which is a faction of the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. However, a statement issued by Pakistan's media team of the military, which is called the ISPR, or the Inter-Services Public Relations, blamed India. And as you said, the statement mentioned that India-backed Kharijis had carried out this attack. Now, naturally, India has dismissed this sort of an allegation and said that the statement made by the Pakistanis is rejected with the contempt it deserves. Now, there is an ongoing insurgency in Balochistan, which is gaining momentum. And there again, the Pakistanis point the accusing finger at India. We have repeatedly said that we have nothing to do. These are homegrown movements. And if you say we are involved, please give us evidence. The Pakistanis have not given a shred of evidence. But they continue to make these baseless attacks, as they have done again by blaming yesterday's attack by this group on the Pakistan Army convoy. So there is no doubt that dissent in the different provinces of Pakistan is on the rise. There is an increasing feeling that the Punjabi majority is exploiting the other ethnic groups, and that is why, since the army is really dominated by the Punjabi elements, the other provinces are venting their anger on the Pakistan army.
Ambassador Dayal, what do you think this could mean in terms of the escalating as well as the present tensions between India and Pakistan? The Indus Water Treaty obviously is something that both the countries are fighting at a number of levels on. What does this mean for the tensions that have already concluded and the ones that exist between India and Pakistan, sir?
Well, I don't think that these tensions are going to go away. India has made it repeatedly clear to Pakistan that the only issue on which talks can take place is terror. Of course, the Pakistani Prime Minister, Mr. Shehbaz Sharif, recently said that he's willing to have talks with India as long as they are concrete and focused and comprehensive. But the fact of the matter is that we are not willing to talk to Pakistan unless they first resolve the terror issue. And they have to put an end to the state-sponsored terrorism, which has been hurting us. And there is no doubt that the Pakistan army is fueling this state-sponsored terrorism. So unless Pakistan ends this, the relationship between the two countries cannot improve. So as I said earlier, I don't see anything positive happening in the bilateral relationship in the foreseeable future.
Ambassador Dayal, always a pleasure having you, sir. Thank you so much. Well, moving on, the Shin Bet security agency announced today that it has arrested more than 60 Hamas operatives in recent months, calling it one of the largest counter-terror operations in the West Bank in years. In a statement, Shin Bet said its agents, along with the IDF and Israeli police, carried out joint operations over the past 3 months and uncovered a major Hamas terror network in Hebron. Authorities say that the group was actively planning a series of imminent attacks. A senior Shin Bet official called the investigation the most significant and complex operation the agency has conducted in the West Bank over the last decade. Investigators revealed that senior Hamas members in Hebron, many of whom had previously served time in Israeli prisons, had been recruiting, arming and training new operatives to carry out shootings and bombings against Israeli targets. Officials said that the cell conducted firearms training, gathered intelligence, produced explosives and assembled bombs, all with the goal of launching major attacks in the West Bank and inside Israel. Although no attacks were carried out, some of the arrested individuals are suspected of being involved in a deadly shooting nearly 15 years ago. Meanwhile, Democrat Chairman Yair Golan has accused Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu of using Gaza hostages for political gains, following US President Trump's remarks linking the crisis to Netanyahu's trial. And lastly, according to media reports, Israeli forces have killed at least 21 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip since dawn, including 5 people waiting for aid at distribution sites. Martin Sa, international affairs expert, is joining us once again. Martin, appreciate you being here. Well, this is big news coming in, right? If Israeli forces have intercepted intelligence of people who were trying to attack Israel and its interests in the country and elsewhere, that really means that there's nothing been learned, there's nothing that has stopped after October 7th.
Unfortunately, every time there's a huge war between the Palestinians and Israel, we have an increase of intifadas. We need to know that Hamas is not only operating in the Gaza Strip, but also in the West Bank. They have Gaza cells in the West Bank who are actually recruiting even minors to perpetrate terror attacks. So this is very concerning, and this is why, unfortunately, Israel has been forced to interrogate minors, and this is something that international media doesn't cover, that a lot of these minors have been working together with terror organizations, and they're using them for carrying out these terror attacks and taking advantage of their age for avoid criminal liability.
And Martin, in this war between Israel and Iran and what's happening in Gaza at this point in time, do you think that the tension towards West Bank has been a little compromised, and that perhaps is something that Israel should refocus on?
Of course. I mean, Hamas is an ideology. It's not a physical territory. Hamas is even outside of Israel. And the Hamas ideology, unfortunately, is present in the West Bank. The only difference is that in the Gaza Strip, there has been since in 2005, that Israeli forces and civilians got out of the Gaza Strip. They had all of the freedom to operate without any supervision. In the West Bank, the situation is different. We have presence of the IDF and of Israeli citizens who live in the Jewish areas. So this is more difficult for them to organize and operate in the West Bank.
Martin, always a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for being here. All right, well, Senate Republicans have taken a major step forward on what US President Donald Trump calls his big, beautiful bill, a sprawling $5 trillion budget proposal that blends tax cuts, welfare reform, and new federal spending limits. Let us take a deeper dive into what the bill is really all about. Well, the bill is seen as a centerpiece of Trump's second term and his economic agenda. At its heart, the bill extends the 2017 Republican tax cuts and delivers on Trump's long-promised tax breaks, including eliminating taxes on tips and overtime and allowing deductions on Social Security benefits for older Americans. It also raises the standard deduction for seniors and increases the cap on state and local tax deductions, something that's become a sticking point for Republicans in high-tax states. But the proposal is not without controversy. The biggest flashpoint is Medicaid. Senate Republicans propose the strictest work requirements ever tied to the federal health program, including forcing low-income, childless adults to work at least 80 hours a month. Re-enrollment would shift from once a year to every 6 months, and the eligibility bar would be higher for families with older children. The congressional budget warns these changes would leave nearly 8 million Americans uninsured. There are also changes to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. The bill would require states to take on a bigger share of funding and impose new work requirements for childless adults. Alaska and Hawaii are temporarily exempt following pressure from the Republican senators. To offset the Medicaid cuts, the Senate added $25 billion in funding for rural hospitals that helped win over some skeptical moderates, but deep divides remain. The bill also raises the debt ceiling by up to $5 trillion and includes limits on which companies can qualify for clean energy tax credits, particularly those with supply chains linked to foreign adversaries like China. The credits would phase out between 2026 and 2028. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news and updates from around the world.